Listen, I don't have much time, but if you want to get wealthy like the rich do, here's how. 70% of people are in debt. They are maxing out their credit cards to buy things they don't need, to impress people they don't like, all just to pay 22% interest on everything they own. And this is the dumbest way to use debt. This is why stupid people give debt a bad name. And when used correctly, debt can actually make you richer and wealthier than if you didn't use debt. And what most of you think about debt is, isn't debt risky? No, it's not if you use it correctly, and that's exactly what the rich and wealthy do. You've been lied to about debt. We all have. Schools, your parents, society, they have all told you to stay away from debt, but every major purchase requires debt. Isn't that concerning? When you graduate high school, they tell you go to school. They help you do your college applications, your college essays, even help you do your SATs, just so you can go apply to colleges. Just to realize that when you go get accepted to colleges, you can't afford to go. What's the only solution? To get a loan. They made it such a huge incentive for you to get a loan, they even offer scholarships. And at the same time, they tell you, hey, the American dream is to buy a house. So when you buy a house, you have to go fill out a credit application, which requires a loan. And at the same time, they tell you if you buy a house, you need a nice car to match it. You go get a car, you fill out a credit application to get a loan on the car. Every single purchase requires debt. But it's the American dream. That is the American dream we've all been sold. So if that's the case, don't you wonder, how can we afford all of this debt?
The national debt stands currently at about $36.2 trillion. And every day, the U.S.
What's really going on that really makes this money cycle flow? Because the truth is, the banks are running a scam. And this scam is exactly what we're going to uncover today. In order to understand how this scam works, you need to understand the flow of money. How can the banks afford to lend out such ridiculous amounts of money throughout the course of a lifetime? Well, they use a system that's not known to the public. It's called fractional reserve banking. And how this works is I choose to deposit $10,000 into any bank. As their policy, they are going to require to deposit 90% of it into another account, in which they use to lend out to other people. So out of my $10,000 deposit, $9,000 gets lent out to people like you, and they charge you interest. If they charge you 25% interest on those $9,000, the bank just made a 25% profit on my money. And the remaining $1,000 is kept in the bank as a reserve in case of a worst case scenario. So how does this really work? How are we all psyoped into this system in which makes us trapped? Well, you see, not only did they make everything require credit, in this case debt, but they made it to where you need the banks to operate. So in this case, how do the banks actually make so much money? Well, you see, if they're using my money to get rich, they are using everyone else's money to get rich as well. If they have billions of dollars in their banks, then they're going to lend out those billions of dollars to other people. If they're making 25% margin on them, then that means that there's infinite money glitch going on in the system. What happens to the system if somebody refuses to pay? Well, you see, the system doesn't essentially break because they take anything you own. They require you to get debt because they will take anything that you own. If you own a house, if you own a car, the banks come and take it if you default on your payments. So in this case, the loans that they give you are essentially no risk. The only risk is a risk to you. So in order to keep the money supply growing, they make sure that they can only lend out money to qualified candidates, which is exactly what your credit score is. If you default on a payment, it tells the banks that you are risky. So if you are risky, it tells the banks that you burn their money supply. So if you burn their money supply, you are a liability. The banks are in the game of making money. If you don't help them make money, they are going to give you a hard time. But the thing is, the system that these banks created have enslaved 99% of Americans. Over 70% of Americans are in debt, and a majority of them can't even afford to pay their debt. But how about the remaining 1%? The 1% have figured out there's a gap in the system. And because they figured out there's a gap in the system, it's been easy to exploit it. That's exactly what I'm going to be breaking down today. So that you understand how the money supply actually works, you now have to understand how you can position yourself to actually exploit the system correctly. You see, when I lived in Section 8, I encountered two different types of people. One type of person actually used that to get Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Jordans, and buy things that they couldn't afford and things that wouldn't make them any money. But then I met another type of person who was using debt to invest into assets that actually made them money. But you see, they both used debt, but one of them used them incorrectly, and because of it, they said debt was bad. Versus the other person who actually made money is consistently using debt to get even richer. The problem here isn't debt, it's the person using debt that makes debt the problem. So if it still isn't clear, I'm going to break this down to a very simple example. Let's take Jacob. Jacob works a job that only earns him $30,000 a year. We look at the average rate of inflation, which is 3% a year. Naturally, if you're making $30,000 a year with inflation means the cost of things go up. So at 3%, it means that everything around you has increased in price 3%. So in simple terms, if Jacob makes $30,000 a year, in order for Jacob to avoid feeling the effects of inflation, Jacob needs to make an extra 3% year over year. So in this case, Jacob needs to make an extra $90. But Jacob chooses to take those $30,000 and invest them into things that decrease 10, 20, 50, maybe even 90% as soon as he buys them. So in this case, let's look at a pair of Jordans. Jordans cost $200, in which he buys, and immediately the market value of those Jordans drop to $100 after he wears them, which is a 50% loss. So Jacob chooses to consistently repeat this over the span of a year. Naturally, Jacob will feel that he is getting poorer. So let's look at Jacob, in which he chooses to invest those $30,000 into assets that grow. Let's say Jacob would have invested into something extremely simple. Let's say a house. He puts $30,000 into a house. At the end of the year, the house appreciated 5%. In this case, Jacob made an extra $150 because he bought his house. And let's say he repeats the same thing over and over and over with other things that he buys. So doesn't this mean that if Jacob manages his money correctly, wouldn't he essentially have more things to his name and theoretically make more money? Yes, he should. And maybe you don't even want to buy a house. You want to buy gold, you want to buy stocks, you want to buy Bitcoin, or maybe even someone like me who just wants to buy cars. And this all comes from personal experience. A lot of people don't know how to manage their money, and because of it, they lose a lot of money. And I fell into the same trap too. I bought a Tesla 3 years ago for $78,000. 2 years later, it was worth $26,000. That's over $51,000 that I lost simply because I owned a depreciating asset. But I know what most of you are saying. Of course, it's a car. In reality, the type of car that I chose lost me a lot of money. So I want to go buy a Lexus. I bought a Lexus for $31,000. And 6 years later, it is worth $23,000. I only lost $8,000 by buying the Lexus. But the car only cost me $31,000 compared to the Tesla at $78,000, in which I only lost $8,000 compared to $51,000. So in this case, the better car buying decision was a Lexus. And the problem with most Americans is they are following the exact same problem. They are buying things that depreciate the same, if not more, than I did when I bought my Tesla. But then we look at other people who believe, maybe my debt isn't so bad. A few weeks ago, I went to USC and I interviewed a college student. And the college student told me that they were $80,000 in debt.
And I'm assuming you took loans to come here, or did you pay it all out of pocket? How many loans did you count?
I don't know if I want to say it's like really high.
Is it above or below 100,000?
Probably a little bit below, but close. Yeah.
$80,000 in debt for a $70,000 a year job. So in this case, she has more debt than what her salary will be bringing her. So if we're running the math, she'll come out of her debt in 10 years. But for many college students, they probably believe that a student debt for a career of that size is 100% worth it. But what if you would have gotten those $70,000 and invested it into a business instead? But then there's another type of person who gets $20,000 in credit card debt and then can't afford to pay their debts. So they default, late payments get reported, missed payments get reported, and now their credit score goes to absolute shit. You see, the problem itself isn't debt. We have all used debt incorrectly. But then when we look at Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Nike, Starbucks, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, they have all leveraged billions of dollars of debt to make billions of dollars of money. And that's exactly what the rich do, but they do it on a far bigger scale. So because I was surrounded by those three different types of people, I've realized there's something that I need to do that's different. So what I did was I took over $300,000 in credit lines and have produced multiple seven-figure businesses. And because of it, I've been able to do this on a much smaller scale than Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Nike, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and any other major corporation who are billions of dollars in debt. But again, what most people don't realize is debt isn't the problem. It's the people using debt that makes debt the problem. You have no one to blame but yourself if you are getting debt and buying things you can't afford. Because why is it that the same formula is working for the ultra rich, including myself, and not working for the people who are buying things that don't make them any money? Is debt the problem or are the people? That's exactly what you need to ask yourself the next time you want to swipe your credit card. But I get it. Most of you think it's risky, or you're probably scared. And I was too before I got my first $50,000 in credit, made my first $10,000 a month in business. So what I did was I found my first business in Amazon FBA, and I used my first credit card to invest into my business. I spent $1,000 to make $1,500 to pocket $500. I paid back my balance, and because I did, I built credit and got access to even more credit. And by doing this, I kept rinse and repeating the cycle, which allowed me to scale to $10, $20, $30, $50,000 in credit limits, which allowed me to scale other avenues in business. So what I did was I took all the money I made from my businesses and I invested into my real estate business, building even more assets. And that's exactly what the rich do. The rich get money that isn't even theirs, invest it into assets that generate even more money, and it snowballs from there. This isn't some garage quick scheme. This is wealth building principles that 99% of people don't understand, which is why they're broke as fuck. I've seen people from all backgrounds use these exact same principles to turn their life around in as little as 12 months. So if you want to stop being broke, I actually made a free step-by-step program that teaches you how to actually get rich. And it contains things that I can't really talk about here. So if you want it, click the link in the description below.